Now I would like to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Peter Tatchell.
Thank you very much to Baroness Jenny Jones for hosting this meeting, and of course to UNPO and the World Baloch Organization for organising it. I'd like to start by saying that the biggest challenge for the Baloch people is how do we get Balochistan from where it is now to where the people want it to be in the future. Now, I speak as a friend and long-time supporter of Balochistan, but I'm mindful, of course, that the future destiny of Balochistan is a matter for the Baloch people. However, in my decades of human rights activism, I have some considerable experience of how national liberation struggles work, the successful strategies that have been won by movements around the world. And what I'd like to do today is offer some ideas for consideration. These ideas are not mine alone. They are the result of ongoing discussions with Baloch national activists dating back nearly 10 years. I think I'd like to start by saying that the survival of Pakistan is in large part dependent upon Western aid, in particular arms sales. The military occupation of Balochistan requires US and other supplied weapons to sustain it. As you all know, US supplied F-16 fighter jets and Cobra attack helicopters have been used to bomb and strafe Baloch villages and areas, killing livestock, people, and destroying crops. If we could find a way to stop those arms sales, that would at least help reduce, perhaps not immediately, but in the medium to long term, reduce the military pressure on Balochistan. And of course, there is a way to do this. The US arms sales to Pakistan very clearly violate the Leahy Amendment to the Foreign Assistance Act. This act and this amendment prohibits Washington from providing weapons to foreign armed forces that engage in human rights violations. So there's a clear possibility of mobilizing people in the US Congress to challenge, under the Leahy Amendment, US arms sales, and if that doesn't work, to do a challenge through the courts. This is the legal basis for cutting off US arms supplies to Pakistan on the grounds they violate human rights in Balochistan, at Sindh and elsewhere. Another suggestion we came up with was the idea that the UN should appoint a special rapporteur on Balochistan. There are special rapporteurs on a whole range of issues and nations and unrepresented peoples around the world. Why isn't there one on Balochistan? And again, this would require lobbying sympathetic governments to try and put that to the UN Human Rights Council, to the UN Human Rights Commissioner, to the General Secretary, and so on. If that rapporteur was in place, he or she would be able to launch investigations and produce reports both to the General Assembly of the United Nations and to the Human Rights Council. And that would be a very important public forum to highlight some of the abuses that we've heard about today. Another possibility is, of course, to seek a UN fact-finding mission to Balochistan to independently assess the deteriorating humanitarian situation there. Again, this is something that the UN routinely does, to send fact-finding missions to trouble spots and conflict zones to produce independent reports and bring them back to the UN for consideration. We've heard that Pakistan does restrict entry to Balochistan for journalists, human rights organizations, and aid agencies. And again, a campaign around lifting that exclusion, I think, is something that could engage the wider global public. The public, whatever they think about the intricacies and details of what is happening, the gut reaction of most people is that there should be no no-go areas for journalists, human rights defenders, and aid agencies. in order to ensure the delivery of aid, and many of you know about the earthquake some years ago where international aid agencies were explicitly stopped from getting in to deliver the aid, we need to really press that, and we need to mobilise those international aid agencies to support that campaign. So if we can get Save the Children, Oxfam, Médecins Sans Frontières and others to support this campaign of getting aid agencies into Balochistan, that will be a very powerful and influential effect. Another option would be to seek the prosecution of military chiefs in Pakistan and intelligence chiefs on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity under international humanitarian law, including via the International Criminal Court or via a UN special tribunal, as was established in the case of the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda. In particular, I would say that prosecution should be targeted against the former military dictator, Pervez Musharraf, and the ex-head of the 12th Corps, Lieutenant General Nasser Ouanga. Those people are key people to target because they have direct, provable, demonstrable culpability for war crimes and human rights abuses in Pakistan. In the interim, we could be lobbying governments to issue international arrest warrants for these people, for Pakistani military and political leaders who've been involved with or colluded with war crimes and crimes against humanity in Balochistan. And there is a very clear mechanism by which international arrest warrants can be issued. All you need to do is get a really good lawyer, expert in these fields, preferably with the backing of the government or government ministers or members of parliament, and that is a real potential. And even if, of course, people will say, well, you can get the arrest warrant, but how did we execute it? Well, the symbolic value in securing an arrest warrant for Musharraf or Yangwa or others, that would be hugely, hugely damaging to their personal reputations and place very severe constraints on their ability to travel around the world freely and to expend the looted resources that they have taken from Balochistan and elsewhere. Another option is the bringing of civil claims in the US courts by Baloch victims of human rights violations by Pakistani state officials, using a mechanism known as the Alien Tort Claims Act, which allows in the US courts for anyone anywhere in the world who has been a victim of provable human rights abuses to bring a claim, a legal claim, against their abusers. And this has been tried and successfully in a number of cases over the last 2 decades. And again, even though ultimately the jurisdiction and the ultimate punishment of the person may not be possible because they'll hide away in Pakistan, the symbolic value of a conviction in the US courts for human rights abuses would be very, very great. We could also lobby to make Western aid conditional on Pakistan ending human rights violations. Not only military aid, but civilian aid is very much dependent for the functioning of the Pakistan state and its agencies. It relies on this aid, and if more governments said, we will only provide this aid if you agree to halt these abuses, again, that's further leverage. And then perhaps, finally, the idea of initiating a global boycott, disinvestment and sanctions campaign targeting the Pakistani government, military and intelligence officials who are implicated in human rights abuses in Balochistan, including travel bans, the freezing of bank accounts, the denial of the rights of their sons and daughters to have education in Western universities. There's a whole raft of things which have already been done against various dictators and their families. There's no reason why it could not be pressed in the case of Balochistan human rights abuses as well. Finally, what I'd like to suggest is that in terms of where we want to go, where the Baloch people want to go, it is very, very important that there is a roadmap, a concrete plan about how Balochistan gets from where it is to where it wants to be. The international community wants to see that plan. The international community wants to know what is your basic set of demands, and where are you going to take them? What is the future of Balochistan going to be? Now, as you're aware, the African National Congress in South Africa had its Freedom Charter, which set out very clearly the kind of non-racial South Africa that the ANC aspired to. It was a great instrument for the mobilization of national and international public opinion and government support. And with that Freedom Charter, the ANC was able to build a global anti-apartheid solidarity movement. So what I'm going to suggest, again, this is based upon the discussions that I've had with various human rights defenders, is a series of proposals, 6 points, about how we might begin the process of de-escalating the conflict. And these are issues which I think every Baloch national organisation can agree to. I know there's great division and splits, but on these 6 issues, I am certain that every Baloch national organisation and every Baloch person just about can agree. The first is to make the demand for a UN-supervised ceasefire, which would include the cessation of military operations by all sides in the conflict, including the confinement of Pakistani forces to barracks and Baloch national insurgents to their guerrilla camps. So a ceasefire to de-escalate the conflict, to reduce the killing. Second, the release of all political prisoners and a full account of the fate of all disappeared persons. Third, the opening up of all parts of Balochistan to journalists, aid agencies and human rights organisations. Fourth, the right of return of displaced refugees, the restoration of their property and compensation by the Pakistani state for losses caused by the conflict. Fifth, an end to the inward colonisation of Balochistan by non-Baloch settlers. And sixth, a UN-supervised referendum on self-determination, offering the people of Balochistan the option of autonomy within Pakistan, but also the option of full independence. Now those to me surely are 6 demands, 6 processes for de-escalating the conflict that all Baloch organisations could agree to. You may fine-tune them, that's great. These are not perfect, these are not set in stone. And then, of course, we have to have an answer to the international community who says, what will Balochistan look like if it is free and independent? They don't want to see a new Taliban-type state. They want to see a state that they can support. And so I would say that, again, there are 6 basic core principles. First, social justice, equality, and human rights for all Baloch people. Second, and very importantly, land reform and the right of every adult Baloch person to have a share in land ownership. Third, the redistribution of wealth and power to all the people of Balochistan. Fourth, a secular state where people of all faiths and none have equal legal status and where no religion is privileged in law, in government, or in public institutions. Fifth, democratic and personal freedoms, including free multi-party elections, the right to protest, freedom of speech and the press, as enshrined in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights and in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And sixth and finally, a UN Commission of Inquiry into disappeared persons and the victims of detention without trial, torture and extrajudicial killings, leading to a UN Special Tribunal to prosecute human rights abusers for war crimes and crimes against humanity. These are not absolutes. These are ideas, suggestions for discussion, refinement, improvement, debate. I think they offer a model for the way forward. And I think that the second 6 proposals would give a very positive reinforcement to the wider international community about what a future Balochistan might look like. So they could be reassured that by supporting your struggle, they are supporting liberal, democratic, humanitarian values. I leave it to your consideration. Thank you.